Welcome, Health Warriors. This is the monthly live stream for cannabis oil secrets. In tonight's presentation, we're going to be doing the endocannabinoid system. All right. So the endocannabinoid system, it's really important, right, for health and healing, for both of those, for health and healing. And feeding the endocannabinoid system is what we do with cannabinoids over here. So a lot of people don't understand what the endocannabinoid system is or what it does and why it's so important. We're going to get into that. This is actually from a presentation that I did in November of last year. So I'm going to put the whole presentation. It's about an hour long or 45 minutes long. I'm going to put the whole presentation link in the comments below, but I'm going to go over this particular part because it's super, super important. Your endocannabinoid system, it's not talked about in today's world too much. Even in today's world, like doctors and chiropractors and people like that I talk to, they're like, son, what is the endocannabinoid system? And basically, you know, it's the key to vibrant health, you know, in today's world and our past world, everything. And so this thing, what if the key to vibrant health has been hidden from you your entire life? And what if it's been suppressed for over 80 years, right? So like I said, this is a presentation that is from a presentation that I did, and I'll put the whole one down below. But I'm going to go over the endocannabinoid system just because it's so important, right? And it's basically the missing link to vibrant health and mental clarity in today's world, right? And we're having to rediscover, you know, all the benefits from it because it was just discovered in the 1990s, or rediscovered, I should say. But let me get into that right now. So yeah, so they supposedly discovered, rediscovered the endocannabinoid system in the 1990s, and every mammal that has a vertebrae has an endocannabinoid system. So that's why, we have benefit, but also our cats, dogs, horses, all that kind of stuff. So it regulates every major body system that you have, and I'll go over like a visual representation of that in just a second. But if it's so important, then why didn't anybody tell us about this? So what does it control? It controls your brain, nervous system, your immune system, digestive system, bones and muscles, your pain responses, like your nervous system, again, and their sleep, mood, memory, all that stuff. So that's why it helps with physical things and also with the mental things like anxiety, stress, depression, clarity, panic attacks, on that side. And then like mental clarity and like short-term memory, recall, all that stuff, confidence even on the other side. So there's a bunch of mental and physical benefits from the endocannabinoid system when it's fed properly, right? So you could see here, so there's these things called CB1 and CB2 receptors, and they're basically cannabinoid receptors. And the dark ones and the light ones represent the CB1 and CB2, But like I said, like it controls all these different systems in your body, and it's a system itself, but it regulates the other systems, so it balances them and it keeps them, from going one way or the other. Just think of your blood pressure from being too high or too low, or being just right. That's basically what it does, so by the way, it helps people with that. We have like well over 100 people that have come to us for other kinds of things, from cancer, chronic pain, whatever, and they're through the course of their time with us, we had over 100 taken off of blood pressure medication because their blood pressure normalized, not intentionally but because they were doing it for other cannabinoids for other issues, but it normalized, and the doctors took them off of the blood pressure medication. It wasn't like me saying you don't need that stuff anymore. It's the doctors saying, hey, you don't need your blood blood pressure medication anymore. And so that's awesome. So we've had over 100 reported cases back to us of that. That just shows you how much how much it does for balancing all the other systems in your body. And you can see, like, it's from your brain, in all your organs, in your skin, your third dermal layer down. That's why it works at point of contact with, like, the topicals that we have, and that are around, because wherever, like, pain may be, you have receptors, your third dermal layer down, below that, and you just put it at point of contact, and it works from the outside in that way. So you could ingest it orally, rectally, and some people do it even vaginally, and so you could do it, like, through the different kind of ways, and then also topically, because your skin is your biggest organ, right? But that's why it does work at point of contact, because you have them all throughout, wherever your skin is, you have them. And then also in your bone marrow, like, not just in your bones, but in your bone marrow, and that's where your cells are made, right? So let me see over here. So we'll get into the cell thing in a second, but what if I told you that most disease in America isn't caused by viruses or bacteria or bad luck? I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it better. But what if it's actually caused by starvation? And what I mean by starvation is starvation of your endocannabinoid system, your ECS. So basically, what I'm saying is, a lot of the supposed dis-ease in the world today, a lot of it is merely symptoms of an endocannabinoid system deficiency. In other words, you're lacking cannabinoids, and your ECS, your endocannabinoid system, is starving because of that, and you're not able to operate optimally because of that, right? And you go into different stages of sickness and disease when you don't have enough, right? And by the way, another thing too is there. So let me go into this next slide here before I go into that. All right. So before I get into what I was going to talk about, the endocannabinoid system is just like all the other systems, like systems of elimination and detoxifying systems in your body. They're overwhelmed because of the toxic world that we live in. I was talking to a client earlier today, and he was even telling me, like, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat is contaminated, and he is correct, right? So we're have a huge toxic burden, not to mention, like, the EMFs and all the other chemicals. There's tens of thousands of chemicals. Thousands are created every year, new harmful chemicals. It's crazy, the toxic burden that we're that we're under, and so that it's a drain on our immune system, but it's also a drain on our endocannabinoid system, especially if we're not feeding it. But even if we are, we need to feed it, like, more than ever before, because more of it's being used up. Just like we need more minerals and more everything else, because that's the minerals and things like that are part of your immune system. So we're always through the toxic overload and toxic burden, and then trying to get healthy and stay healthy, and then exercise and work out and do all these different things. So we're using up a lot of minerals, just to try to maintain a modicum of health, right? And it's the same thing with your ECS. It gets overburdened, and so even if you're feeding it, like, a minimal amount of cannabinoids, you might need more, especially if you have a chronic condition, to get better. That's why with the with the RSO protocols, why they work up to, like, a gram a day, and do, like, a full frontal assault, where you're just doing a massive amount to overcome a situation. And then when you overcome it, you taper down into a maintenance phase where it's much less, like maybe 10% or 20% of what you were taking to overcome the situation. Okay. So the endocannabinoid system, it's undernourished, and an undernourished endocannabinoid system means that your body is going to go haywire in one way or another. And what that means is that when people have like predispositions for different kinds of dis-ease, right? So when you have an endocannabinoid deficiency, it'll manifest differently in different people, because like with me, the main huge thing for me is glaucoma. So like if I stop taking my stuff, I go blind in less than a week. You know, that's why I'm in this, have this company and everything, because I depend on having quality stuff all the time. But other people, you know, it could be diabetes, could be leukemia, could be cancer, you know, and different milder things before you get there along the way. But it all, you know, people manifest in different ways, but it all comes down to an endocannabinoid system deficiency, not feeding your endocannabinoid system with cannabinoids, in other words, right? So, it's not about getting high, and it's not about cannabis as medicine either, right? So I don't like the term like medical cannabis or this is my medicine or something like that. I think of it, you know, as an essential nutrient. You know, I've been working with cannabis and holistic health for 39 years, and I think of it as an essential nutrient. And if you're lacking that essential nutrient, then your body is going to malfunction, and eventually you may die. Right? You know, just, you know, if you don't believe that, you have an endocannabinoid system that needs to be fed with cannabinoids, right? You know, it only makes sense. And I mean, people understand, like with something as simple as vitamin C. Like if you lack vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. You're gonna eventually get like massive illness and eventually die from that, just from lack of vitamin C. You don't have a vitamin C system in your body, but you do have an endocannabinoid system. So the endocannabinoid system might be even you know, feeding your body with cannabinoids might be even a little bit more important than the vitamin C, right? You know, they're both vital to your health, and your life. It's no joke, right? So let me get back over here. Yeah. So there's this thing that we talk about, the endocannabinoid system is responsible, and that's gene expression. And I'll go over exactly what gene expression it is in a second. But I'll just go over it right now. The gene expression, it's basically telling your cells what to do, you know, giving them the information on what to do. Now, when we were in like, you know, high school or junior high or college, you know, biology or chemistry or whatever kind of class, you know, they tell you that your cells, like each individual cell out of the, you know, billions or trillions of cells that you have in your body, you know, that are yours, not, you know, your mammalian cells, they have each cell has the entire DNA library for your for you, you know. So it's a vast library, like picture this library, you know, this Library of Congress or something, you know. And that's your DNA. So your heart cell has all of this information for your whole entire body. Your lung cells, your muscle cell, they have this entire vast library. So the muscle cell only needs the information for that muscle cell. The heart cell only needs the information for the heart cell. So how is it going to know where to get it from if it's all the information there? It can't just go, okay, it's right here. No, it's, you know, where is it at? I don't even know where to go. So the endocannabinoid system, the ECS, is the librarian that pulls that information for the heart cell, for the muscle cell, for the lung cell, etc., right? For the blood cell, etc. It's what gives it the instructions, so it doesn't have to wonder what to do and malfunction along the way. So that's why cells malfunction when you don't have enough cannabinoids feeding your endocannabinoid system, because like the endocannabinoid system literally go, here heart cell, here's the instructions on how you should function. Here muscle cell, here's the instructions on how you should function. Don't worry about looking everywhere else. I got you, right? And there are two things that I know of that are responsible for gene expression, and it's the endocannabinoid system and cannabinoids, right? And then vitamin D. Now, you think, okay, vitamin D, I'll take more vitamin D. Well, the endocannabinoid system, this is the problem with that. Endocannabinoid system is what you might call it. The endocannabinoid system is. I was reading one of the comments and I sort of lost my train of thought, but it's the endocannabinoid system is responsible for 95% or more, like they say 95 to 99% or more of gene expression, and the vitamin D can only be responsible for 1% to 5% of the gene expression. But and this is why I think most people have a vitamin D deficiency, even people living in where I live in Arizona, is because they're not feeding their body with enough cannabinoids, right? So listen to this, like, so the endocannabinoid system and cannabinoids are responsible for 95% and 99% of gene expression, right? Telling your cells, giving your cells the instructions on how to function properly. The vitamin D is 1 to 5%, but if there's not enough cannabinoids or none at all that you're feeding your endocannabinoid system, then that's all shut off, right? So 100% of your vitamin D that you get from the sun, from wherever, from your supplements, whatever, as long as it's absorbable and bioavailable, then it goes towards that gene expression and pretty much nothing else, because that's so important. You know, giving your cells the instructions on what to do is so important, right? And I understand librarians spelled wrong there too as well, but yeah. So like if there's not enough cannabinoids, then that'll use up all the vitamin D, and then you'll be lacking in both cannabinoids and vitamin D, and get the problems from both, right? It just makes sense. Okay, so hopefully you understand what's going on with the gene expression, how it gives your cells those instructions, right? And like here, heart cell, here's the instructions on how to function. Here, muscle cell, here's the instructions on how to function. You don't have to look through the vast DNA library. So there's so gene expression, there's neuromodulation, and also homeostasis, right? So homeostasis is what we think of as what the endocannabinoid system does mainly. That's what I mentioned earlier, is it balancing the systems. So homeostasis is just a fancy term for balancing the systems in your body, and it's like the like a unicorn, like something that like doesn't exist really. It'd be nice to have, like a lucky unicorn, but it doesn't really exist in reality. And when I was in school, because remember I went to, I did like pretty much, all pre-med kind of stuff. I went to chiropractic school, all that kind of thing. I've taken like 8 or 9 different chemistry classes, and probably 10 different biology classes. I mean, a lot of different things, and we're taught in all of those classes that that homeostasis is a unicorn. It's what would be nice to have. If we could just be able to achieve homeostasis, we'd be able to achieve optimal health and not need medications and stuff like that, right? And they say that there's no way to actually achieve it, and they don't teach about the endocannabinoid systems in those schools either, right? Because I went to those schools, and so the endocannabinoid system, if you look up the definition, like in the dictionary, if you type it into an AI, it'll tell you that it's responsible for homeostasis, right? So they were just like deleting a whole system, an entire system of your body, and that system has everything to do with health, everything. It's crazy. So let me go back over to this picture here. So they say that like all of your new cells, not the cells that get split, in the different areas, but the new cells that are created, all of the new cells are created in your bone marrow, right? And like we mentioned earlier, you do have the cannabinoid receptors, these CB1 and CB2 receptors in your bone marrow, along with everywhere else that you have them, right? So that all the cells are made in your bone marrow, and they're all the same. Remember, like every cell has all of the DNA for your whole entire body, every single cell. Your heart cell, your muscle cell. So It doesn't become your cell doesn't become a heart cell or a muscle cell or liver cell or whatever until it gets to that area. Like so that they're created in your bone marrow, and then they're dispersed out to where they need to be, the fresh cells. And then once they get to that area, then that cell will become a heart cell or a muscle cell or a liver cell, etc. Okay, so that's what we're taught. And then how it gets the instructions for that is through the endocannabinoid system if it's fed with cannabinoids. So the endocannabinoid system will give it those instructions. Here, heart cell. Here's like we mentioned earlier. Here's the instructions on how to function properly, and you can be happy and healthy. And that's why there is so much sickness and disease in the world today, is because of like 80 years ago or 80 plus years ago in 1937, they took away cannabis, and slowly but surely, like there was more and more sickness and disease, plus other toxic, stuff, being bombarded onto us as well. But we don't have but our defense mechanisms have been taken away also, right? Because we do have defense mechanisms, and your endocannabinoid system is a huge part of that, right? And if you're not feeding your body with cannabinoids to feed your endocannabinoid system and have it function properly, your body is going to malfunction somewhere along the way, especially the older that you get. But it's happening more and more in younger and younger people, right? Younger and younger people are getting cancer. Like they don't call adult like type 2 diabetes. They stopped calling it adult onset diabetes. Like back in 2006, like my whole life growing up, it was called adult onset diabetes, and I didn't even know anybody that had diabetes, right? And they stopped calling it in 2006. That I know of, because I was speaking at a junior diabetes thing, and they told me that they stopped calling it adult onset because so many children were getting it, right? And you see children with hanging fat, like and all kinds of different kinds of dis-ease in today's world that never happened before. And your genes don't mutate that quickly, right? It takes hundreds and thousands of years to mutate genes. Like it's not something that we're just like we're malfunctioned now. Like we're not good anymore. Like we're not the reason we're malfunctioning is because we're not feeding our endocannabinoid system, and it's on purpose, by the overlords or whatever, that want that stuff away. They're still trying to do that to us today, right? With all the stuff that's going on, constantly. I see the back end of what's going on, and even with the changing from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing, right? It's gonna take away a lot of stuff for a lot of people. So, but anyways, getting back to the endocannabinoid system, that's why it's so important. It has everything to do with your health, because it has everything to do with giving your cells the instructions on how to function properly, because it's the librarian that gives your cells those instructions, and that's how the systems in your body get balanced, basically. Because it helps all those different systems to have the instructions on how to operate optimally. Like your lymphatic system, everything. It's crazy. So we'll talk about really quick here. So part of gene expression is this thing called neuromodulation, right? So we're talking about gene expression is giving your cells the instructions on how to operate optimally. So you have like a nervous system, right, from your brain, through your central nervous system, out through your peripheral nervous system, all the way out to your fingertips and your toes and stuff, right? And there's communication that has to happen from your brain to your central nervous system, which is basically your spine and the nerves that come out from your spinal cord, out to to all the way out to your fingertips and your toes and all that kind of stuff. and there's communication. So brain, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and as it's a super highway, a complex of nerves that go down and up. It's called down regulation and up regulation of communication. And if you don't have enough cannabinoids in your system to have that gene expression to give those instructions to your nervous system on how to function optimally, then there'll be like little miscommunications. And you think of it as traffic jams along those super highways, either as it's down regulating or up regulating, sending information down or back up, the communication and stuff like that, and that's why so many people that have, things like neuropathies and, that they've had for like 20, 30 years. We've had people like take stuff and like their first day of taking it, and they've gone to spent tens of thousands of dollars on physical therapy and all kinds of different stuff. And their first day, taking it, like their neuropathy is gone, and they keep on taking the stuff and it's gone. They stop taking their stuff and it comes back. They stop taking the cannabinoids and it comes back. It's really, really crazy. And you see other people with different kinds of pain syndromes that they've had like for decades, and it goes away. And that's because that communication is being repaired. And then also there's the anti-inflammatory effects and all the different other kinds of healing things if there was an actual injury or trauma that caused the thing. But there's so many people these days that have different kinds of pain and neuropathies, et cetera, for no apparent reason, right? Like there was no injury that caused it. They just have it now, and they're calling it like just a symptom of old age or something like that. But it's not a fucking symptom of old age. It's a symptom. It's an endocannabinoid system deficiency. That's it, right? So that's basically the gist of it. So in the cannabis world, you hear a lot about the homeostasis part, like it balances systems, but people don't really understand what that means, but it sounds cool, but the gene expression and neuromodulation, all that kind of stuff, you don't hear that talked about because people don't, like people in the medical community don't even really understand it. When I talk to doctors about like MDs and stuff about the gene expression, they're thinking I'm talking about like gene mutation and forcing genes to do one thing instead of another. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about giving the genes the instructions that they're supposed to have so they can operate the way they're meant to be, right? So you can enjoy vibrant health. That's what I'm talking about. It's not about manipulating anything. It's about just giving the proper nutrients to your body so your body could have the proper instructions and ammunition to function properly and fight off sickness and dis-ease as it comes in, right? Because we're always, fighting off some kind of a thing. There's always toxins coming in. But if we could have more nutrition and especially much more cannabinoids than we're taking in right now, on a daily basis, because it's an essential nutrient. It's not a medication. Then you could overcome things. You could overcome, the sickness and dis-ease and not have to get sick when everybody else does and all these kinds of things. Because I'll sort of, close with that. I'll answer questions and stuff like that too if people have any questions. But like we see that a lot with people that are in jobs that are where they're surrounded by people that are sick all the time, right? And we have a lot of nurses and we have a lot of teachers that I work with, right? And and they come because they were either out of shape or sick or both, and they were tired of just getting sick all the time, and they're either around kids and other teachers that are sick, or they're nurses that are in hospitals that are where people are obviously sick all the time, and just through doing some cannabinoid supplementation and our other stuff, our trifecta of health, the Shilajit, the MSM, and then changing the diet around where not just like adding in good nutritional stuff, but removing things that are doing harm as well. Doing like root cause kind of stuff. Like taking away root cause. Of certain kinds of dis-ease and putting in other nutrients that are, missing links, that aren't being fed to people these days, just doing those simple, very simple things, because it's simple in nature, but not always easy to do, if you don't know what to do. But just doing those simple things, these teachers and nurses, they don't get sick when everybody else is sick, right? And if they do, they're only down for like a day, maybe 2 or 3 days. But in today's world, teachers are going down for like 2 weeks and a month at a time. I see it all the time. Like I used to get sick for this long, and now I don't. All my coworkers are still doing that. They're still eating the donuts. There's in the break room, and that are in there every day. And candies during the different holidays, which happen like almost every week now. And all that kind of stuff. And same thing with the nurses. They don't get sick. When all the other nurses are getting sick. With all the other sick people around them, and if they ever do get sick, then it's only like 1 to 3 days, and not the 2 weeks to a month or more that many people are getting sick these days. That's the power of taking control of your health. That's and taking in, taking the time just to ingest the essential nutrients that will provide optimal health for you, right? Like I said, there is a longer version of this, that I presented to the International Truth Expo in just about 4 or 5 months ago in November 2025. And I'll put the link down below to that. If there's any questions, then just let me know. And if I miss any questions for whatever reason, because I'm not, like too savvy with the live streams or whatever, I have the information that I want to get out to people, and this is a good way that I see to do it. So if I missed any of your questions or anything like that, then let me know. And in the comment section, I'll also have a link to our free group. It's called Cannabis Oil Secrets, and you could ask questions in there as well. It's free to join, and there's free protocols, and you get reminders about the monthly live stream. I do monthly live streams on different topics related to cannabis and cannabis health. And that's basically it, guys. Like I said, I don't see any questions, so we'll just end it here. Thank you for tuning in, and hope you have a beautiful evening. Bye-bye.